It's the last but one Cardiff City phone-in of the season, and we got a special guest on the show tonight. Lovely to welcome Andy Dibble back on the show. Thanks a lot, Andy, for coming on with us tonight.
Thank you very much.
Which is great because it gives us something. Obviously we're talking about getting promoted, but we're over the line, so it's great to have somebody like you in we can chat to. Al Worth is with us, and Peter Young. So there's plenty to discuss. Shall we talk a little bit about City first, as in the fact we got promoted and the weekend. If I come to you, Al, first on that one, as I said, I picked the wrong game. I went to the Port Vale match and it was so terrible, and I lost the will to live. And then I thought I can't go through with it again. And I wish the hell I'd done it the other way around. I mean, from your point of view as a City fan, taking into account, and Andy will get this as well, what we went through from the kind of low that we went through at the end of last season, and the despair and finishing bottom and being terrible, to this season, being there for that kind of party thing. Was how are you feeling about that?
Yeah, we've been waxing lyrical at times this season, haven't we? And I've said it's been some of the best football I've ever seen down there. I don't care what anyone says. I mean, the promotion teams are sort of 82, 83, going back to there when Andy was there, and I'm sure there were fantastic players there. But I just think probably because there's so many local boys involved, it's really enabled us to really get behind them. The photos coming out, after Reading, there was 9 academy boys there photographed on the pitch, and then on the weekend they brought some of the even younger boys onto the pitch. There was like 12 or 13 of them photographed, and it's an incredible achievement at the club. And I think for whatever reason, it does seem easier to get behind players who have been nurtured at the club, who are from our communities, if you like. And I've found it a much easier watch when you don't feel as sort of mercenary players have come in just for a season to pick up a paycheck. I'm not going to single out anyone. Season's gone by, but this year it feels like all the players have been pulling in the right direction. It's been a pleasure. It has been a pleasure. And even though we did have the blip, it's forgotten, isn't it? Hopefully, it's just been great. I've thoroughly enjoyed it, and for the first time in many years, it hasn't felt a chore going down on Saturday. I've looked forward to it.
It's nice to see you smiling now. I've not seen that expression.
Okay. Fair enough.
Peter, you were obviously you were down there. In general, how we bring Andy, because I'm trying to be really interested in what Andy has to say about this. But what's your take on this season? Is there any any sense of disappointment at all that we didn't win the league, or just none of the matter at all?
Maybe it would have been the icing on the cake if we'd won the league, but it doesn't matter, does it?
No.
In a few years' time, it's not going to matter. Lincoln will probably be back down and we'll be soaring high. We had to have a blip, Al. It's Cardiff City. You've got to have a blip.
Yeah.
Can't possibly do it the easy way. We've got to worry. We're so many points ahead, but this could happen, that could happen. I think it was sewn up a fair time ago, I think. But probably the most enjoyable season I've ever had watching the club, and I've been supporting them for probably 55 years, I would say. And that, for me, it beats the Premier League days and things like that.
Easily.
Absolutely. Going to different grounds was lovely, because we do go to most of the away games. Going to different grounds was absolutely fantastic. Can't wait to go to Mansfield on Saturday as well. But just absolutely loved it. And I mean, the game of the season was Reading. I mean, that was just such an experience. Mostly because 10 minutes before the end of the game, we weren't being promoted.
No.
The events that happened at Exeter, I've never known excitement like it. It was great. Yeah. It was brilliant. But overall, the season has been brilliant. As you say, the fact that it's young Welsh players, hopefully that will mean a little bit when it comes down to loyalty, and that we don't lose too many. But it's such a good group and such a young group. I mean, just hats off to BBM, isn't it?
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah. Well, let's bring Andy in on that, because I know you keep a weather eye on Cardiff City, because you were with the club when you were a kid, so it's been an important part of your life, Andy. Yeah. What's your thoughts on the style of football that City play these days under Barry Murphy? Is there a touch of the Man City's going on in the way we play?
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. I mean, obviously he's done his ground in his schoolwork under Pep, and obviously had his spell at Rochdale. He put his own stamp onto the game, and the football I've seen. Obviously, I did attend. I was wrong. 2 games before Christmas. before my legs started functioning a little bit better again. What I saw and I saw them away at Port Vale, which was a tough night for them early on, where they didn't do so well. But obviously, it's been free-flowing football, created plenty of goals, and they thoroughly deserve, the place in the Championship. Listening to Al's brilliant. Listening to Peter yourself from a fan's perspective, and I can imagine how you all felt, how your stomachs felt on the relegation from the Championship. But 10 months later down the line, or a year later down the line, that the club are back in the Championship, which they thoroughly deserve. And the refreshing thing is to have these young local players. It's a credit to the academy, to the staff, and to the people behind it, because if you can bring young players through that, it's got to bond well for the future. And I mean, obviously, you've only been promoted. Or I say we. I still feel part of it, although I'm not anymore. You
are.
Yeah, well, I am as a fan. I'm a fan as well. So, I'm sure that Brian now will be automatically looking to see what he needs for next season. But it's great when you've got homegrown players, because the shirt means a lot. And Al did mention the word mercenaries. I mean, without naming names, over the years, I've been at different clubs, and as a coach and a player, and I've experienced players that maybe might not want to run through a brick wall. So it means a lot. It's a big, big plus for me, and the future looks bright if they can add around those young players. And the season has only finished, as we know, but football never stops. And from my opinion, my time there to be promoted, as a player, which is a fantastic experience in '82 and '83, and obviously the promotion to the Premier League is was a dream come true. And lastly, before you come back, I looked at the scenes on Saturday with everybody on the pitch, and I relate to the last game against Reading, and when we got promoted on that boiling hot day. It was 0-0. It was tense right until the very end, and when that final whistle went, the feeling was amazing. So any promotion's fantastic, and I'm just made up for everybody.
So Andy, I'll put it this way: I wasn't sure we do as well. I didn't think we're going to go straight back up. I didn't think that, if I'm honest. And then Brian Barry Murphy came in, and he wasn't that kind of. He was the younger type, we've had some younger types in the past, and it hasn't always worked out, and he wasn't as well known as some of the other names that were bandied about. I've heard about him from friends in Ireland, and I was kind of quite excited about it, but it kind of exceeded my expectations at the time. Did you, when you thought they're going with a bunch of youngsters and not spending much money, were you kind of cautiously optimistic back then?
Well, in all fairness, it was a shock when he did get the job, because Cardiff City's a massive club. Now, that's not me saying that I didn't think he was the right man for the job, because every man deserves a chance.
Yeah.
And obviously, he had done his homework with Pep, and learned a lot there. And it has paid off. Sometimes you can jump in and get a manager with loads of experience, pay him a lot of money, and it doesn't work. So, I mean, it's an outstanding achievement for him for what he's done. And obviously, it took him a little while to get going, but I think he's done incredible. And the brand of football, as everybody, all I hear and what I see is, they've played a terrific type of football, which has, got the fans on their seats. So it's been a good choice, and he's been given a bit of time to obviously put his stamp on it, and let's hope he can continue that next season.
Do you know much about him at all? Got any connections with him?
Only little bits from my contacts at Manchester City who've talked to him as a really decent guy and a really, really good young coach. So, he has had I've had good feedback off people at Manchester City about him. That was in his early days before Rochdale. So the biggest thing for me is, he's earned his stars now, and his next test is next season. Although I'm sure that as a staff and players, they'll want to enjoy the break. Yeah.
Well, later on in the show, we're going to talk a little bit about your role and what your kind of what your routine is, because I know you come across a lot of young players, and it seems very much Al, as if BBM does like to go with the younger players, doesn't he? There was a comment there from Mitch saying about Joel Bagan disappointing not to pick up one of the awards at the end of the season. He had an amazing season, though, didn't he? But there's still, we don't know whether he's going to get a new contract yet. I think he will. He'll probably get a long one, I hope. But do you see that much change in Al in terms of BBM's mindset and philosophy of belief in the young players? Because moving up to the Championship, it is quite a big move, isn't it? I know we were there a season ago.
I've got to say that when he was appointed, I thought we'd gone for the cheap option. That was my initial thought, because none of us had heard of him, and then the delay in making any signings, and we're thinking, we're going to rely on last year's squad, and then I think, last year's squad, we got relegated. I could never have foreseen this. I don't think anyone really could have. It's interesting, and no, Ollie's saying at the moment, he said, we believe that we can kick on now, and when we've played some Premier League teams in the Carabao Cup, we can match them back-to-back promotions and so on. When our players are on their day, it looks like we don't need any strengthening. But when they're not on their day, so we talked earlier about the blip, then you look across the whole team and you think, my God, there's some strengthening needs doing there. It's difficult, isn't it? You can't. I mean, all of them to me have had great seasons. Going back to Joel Bagan, Rich Lewis has said, disappointed he didn't pick up one or other of the awards. Very unlucky, I suppose. Wintle got players player, didn't he? So that was down to his colleagues. It must have been tight between Wintle and Bagan, I think, for Player of the Year. I think the biggest reward for Joe Bagan, he'd be in the Championship, sign a new contract. I think he'll get in the Pro squad, the full squad for next time out, and I think that'd be a huge reward. I think that'd be a huge reward for him. Robinson has been there, so he might have the ear of people in the background there and say, "Hang on a second, we've got this lad with us." Unless Bagan has been that good that he's able to kick on even further. I don't know. I don't know if any of these players would want to move away unless there's massive paychecks involved. I don't know. Every one of the ones out of contract in terms of Wintle, Bagan, NG, trot differently, I suppose, because not out of contract as such. I'd like to see them all re-sign or sign new contracts without a shadow of a doubt.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting, Peter, isn't it? I mean, it is a really big summer for us now. It's a big summer, and last summer was big in a different way, right? But this summer is exciting. We got it to look forward to. We got the makings of a really good squad. We got some great youngsters. I imagine some of the players will move on. Are you thinking like Ryan Wintle, who's picked up both Player of the Season and Players Player of the Season? He's had a cracking season. Perry NG has been Perry NG, the Perry NG of old again. Those kind of players. Would you be inclined to want to have those kind of experienced backbone in and around the squad as well?
Definitely, yeah, definitely. The youngsters obviously have been fantastic, but you still need a spine of experience there. And the good thing about you talk about Wintle and NG, they both got Championship experience anyway. Maybe not of the best over the last couple of seasons, but they know what it's all about, which the youngsters coming through don't really. So I think they're vital to keep on. I think, like Al said, I thought when we heard about BBM's appointment, who's he? Have they gone cheap again? But my goodness, people say it was a lucky appointment, but apparently at his interview, he just blew everybody away with what he knew about our academy, because obviously that's where his football knowledge lied, really. And he's just been a total breath of fresh air. But yeah, NG, Wintle, people like that, Bagan, obviously, yeah, we need to keep them. We need to keep them. And the way everybody talks about BBM, I'd be surprised if they want to move. Especially NG. NG is gushing about him all the time.
Yeah, he looks happy, doesn't he? He looks really happy.
Absolutely.
So let's hope it sticks around. There's some questions coming in for Andy, of course.
I was just going to touch there first on Joel Bagan, which is an interesting.
Yeah, go on.
Sorry for jumping in.
No.
Obviously, he made his. He was in and out when I was there, but it's been an amazing transformation, and just shows you with a bit of time, his development physically. He looks now a proper player, and he's become more mature, more physical. The physical side of it is coming, and I think he will get even better in the Championship. He's had that little bit of experience. A young boy when I left, but he looks as if he's grown into a man.
How old was he, Andy? when you met him?
So it'll be when I first met him in 2017.
Wow.
He was a teenager, young teenager, wasn't he?
Yes.
Yeah.
Obviously, been
14, 15 maybe.
Yeah. So, he's come on and he's developed nicely, and he looks a very, very promising player. We'll go from strength to strength.
Could you kind of see straight away he had something about him? Was he, but was that cheeky to ask?
Yeah, no, I could straight away, and also there's one player I'd love to mention. I know he's been up and down. He probably is Ruben Colwell, and I was on the training ground with one day. Mick McCarthy said to me, "Dibs, who's that?" And I said, "It's Ruben Colwell, gaffer." I said, "That player's going to have a future." Mick said he's going to play in the next couple of weeks, so I'm glad that Ruben's come on as well, and his brother Joel, but obviously he was a lot younger.
Yeah, it's great to have those brothers in there. It's just something quite nice about that. The Bennetts spring to mind. It's good to see that. And a question for you from Steve Thomas. By the way, on the subject of Steve Thomas, Steve was just to say, Andy, he's had some significant health issues this year, and at one stage he wasn't sure when he'd be getting back to Cardiff. So he lives near Nottingham, so a home game is from Nottingham to Cardiff, and he was quite unwell, to say the least. But he managed to get down for that game on the weekend. I'm really, really glad he was there for that. So, last season I saw him and he was in bits when we were getting relegated. So all the best to you, Steve, with your health over the summer. He asked you a straightforward question, and I'm sure lots of City fans would like to know this. The best player you played with at Cardiff City and the most underrated?
Well, you'll have to go back to the season we got promoted in 1982-83. And it would have to be one of the Bennett brothers, Dave, obviously. Fantastic ability, one of the best wide man, one of the best crossers of the ball that I've ever seen. And obviously, if you relate back to the cup final when he crossed for Keith Ouchin for Coventry against Tottenham, I think everybody will remember that. The underrated one is difficult. Probably at the time could be his brother, but then that was only because of his age at the time. But then Gary obviously gone on to be a fantastic defender and a proper player. So I could almost relate to Gary at the time, a little bit younger, being a bit of a Joel Bagan type, who then became a proper player, proper defender, and a fantastic ambassador for Sunderland Football Club.
Well, I couldn't remember that many brothers, and the Giles brothers spring to mind, but something special. I love the Bennett. So when Dave Bennett used to get the ball, obviously playing at Ninian, and I remember, you'd be on the bob bank or whatever, and Dave Bennett be on the wing, you pick it up, and the whole crowd would lift, as soon as he was on the ball. Yeah,
well, he could do things that other players couldn't do, especially in tight areas, which is a massive trick to have up your sleeve. A magician, a really, really good, talented wide man. Obviously, one of the old-fashioned wide men that used to go on the outside rather than coming on the inside.
Why don't they do that anymore? Why don't they do that anymore?
Great question. I mean, I'm not saying I'm going to pick the team, but if it was me, I would keep swapping them over. And I'm often seeing this. The inverted winger now seems to be one of the biggest things in football now. They want to
fashionable, isn't it?
Yeah, they want to put them on the opposite side, coming in and playing into the number 9.
Yeah, I'm with you. Totally agree with you. If it does my head in, but many people have heard about that many times. Steve Thomas, again, thanks for the memories you gave us. I was behind the goal when you saved the penalty at Barnsley in 1984, and at Ellen Road when you saved the penalty against Leeds that season. Any memories of that, Andy?
Yeah, I remember that. I remember the saves really well, to be honest. And both any penalty save's a big save. The difference is to that question is going back in the day, there wasn't as much information given, so players quite rightly as fault by the coaches. I mean, I remember when Dylan Phillips saved 2 for me against Preston, and it was written on his bottle. So back in the day, then you had to do those fact-finding missions yourself. And do your own homework. So, yeah, big saves, big moments, and obviously very, very pleased and proud to have made them.
Did you try and psych out the striker? when the penalty was going on?
Yeah, I think time delaying for me, a little bit of movement on the goal line, and obviously trying to get into their eyes if you could was always something that you practice and try to do.
Yeah. Do you remember that? Remember the Grobbelaar one and the European one on the wobbly stuff?
Yeah, when he gave it the wobbly legs. Yeah, I'll never forget that, and it worked for Bruce.
Grobbelaar the wobbler. That was maybe it was taking it a stage too far. I wanted to ask you when you were at City. I mean, you were really young when you came in. Who were your kind of mates? Who became your mates, or who were your early mates when you were at the club?
Well, Dave and Gary, obviously.
Right.
Going back to, I mean, I've been fortunate to get promoted as a player on several occasions with different teams. The biggest thing I can talk about is the camaraderie we had as a squad, a team. Everybody throughout that 16 or 18 players got on really well. And I'm sure that's the same as it is at Cardiff today. And without that, you don't get promoted. And if you look around the different leagues and the different in the countries today, the teams that struggle, you don't expect to struggle. Normally there's an undercurrent and people are not getting on, and a bit of bad feeling between players. So first and foremost, you do need a good ingredient, and that is togetherness.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's noticeable, Andy. I'm only obviously looking from the outside, but it seems, I don't know whether Al or Peter were going to comment on this, but it just seems like BBM seems to have a kind of a management style about him, that he brings in the right characters. He's not going to bring people who are going to rock the boat. And I think that's really important, because when you 82, 83, it wasn't a huge squad either, was it?
Absolutely. It wasn't. And he's obviously done his own work and he knows what he's needed. And just going back on that subject, I can also go back to Neil Warnock and the squad of players we had under Neil. I think when that season started, I can't exactly quite remember, but we weren't the bookies' favourite to go up. But Neil Warnock had something special about him that got players together. The bonding, even relating back to the pre-season trips. I mean, everybody will know, it's common knowledge now that we went down to his neck of the woods down near Plymouth, where, we trained on I can't use a swear word here, but dog poo park, we'll call it. And although we stayed in a nice hotel and good facilities, I mean, we ended up having to cut the grass and take all the cuttings off ourselves before we could train on it. We had a barbecue at Neil's house, and I'll never forget his speech that night on the patio at his own house down in Lou, his holiday home. And he said to us, we are going to get promoted this season because we have a special group of players here. Nobody fancies us, but we're going to do it the Warnock way. And it happened. I know it was a different style of football to what you've seen today.
Yeah.
But an effective style of football that obviously, as I said, got us into the Premier League. Would
you say he's one of the great managers, or one of the great characters, or both? Neil Warnock.
Well, Neil's man management skills are the best I've ever come across. I mean,
right.
Obviously, he will come down 3 days a week. He doesn't do a lot of coaching. He watches intently. He will talk when he needs to talk. He leaves everything to Ronnie, to Kevin, and to myself with the goalkeepers. It was Friday when Neil Warnock came alive. He came alive on a Friday when the team did the shape and then the set plays, and that was where you saw the real Neil Warnock. That was, and his Saturday at 3:00 started on the Friday morning as soon as we stepped on the training ground at 10:30.
And what was his kind of, how did he, I suppose all managers must do this differently. Was there any kind of sense direction with him, or did you're the goalkeeping coach, just get on with it kind of thing, or did he have like a mentality he wanted to get across to you?
He picked into me all the time because he needed to know every single thing about the goalkeepers, not only in the training during the day, how they were away from home, even to the fact where I can relate back to a time where he said to me, and Neil Etheridge had 2 great seasons. Let's not forget.
Good keeper, wasn't he?
Yeah, he done really well. And obviously the club bought him in for nothing. I mean, he wasn't as pretty as Nathan Trott with a ball at his feet. We know that. But he made saves, and he made big saves. But I think there was a period over the the time over the Christmas period, and he said to me, Dibs, what about Neil? I said, Gaffer, I think he needs a rest. And I wasn't picking the team. He went, do you know what? That's brilliant, son. He said, I'm thinking exactly the same thing. I want you to go and tell him that he's going to be left out with the next 2 games. I'm going to play Murphs. You tell him, but tell him he'll be back in. I want him to have a rest and come back refreshed. And the little bit of not wobble, the little bit of indifferent form that he had, sort of like when he'd had the 2-game rest, he came back and he was flying. So those are the type of things that Neil Warnock entrusted in his staff.
Yeah, it's interesting because he sometimes gets a really bad press, Neil Warnock. He's a Marmite character, isn't he? Really, I guess. Richard Lewis, Sandy, what are your thoughts on Nathan Trott? Actually, and he says he thinks it'd be a big mistake if we don't sign him permanently.
I think he's had an excellent season. He suits the style of football. Obviously, he's made big saves. I think he's ready to go into the next level. I do think he needs to learn from the little couple of mistakes he has made, which have sometimes cost him, where he might have been a little bit too complacent on the ball. I mean, the higher up you go, as we all know, teams will be identifying that. So I think the biggest thing for him, he can step up, but it'll come under the game management banner, where he's going to have to be bang at it all the time. Concentration levels will need to be really high. There was only one other thing I thought he might do a little bit better, and that was probably command his box a little bit more. But that's come up actually tonight. Take nothing away from him. He's had a fantastic season, and you couldn't knock him.
So Al, there's that comment. I'm just trying to find the comment that came out on his social media today, unless you got it in front of you now.
Yeah, Richard Lewis put it up as well. I'll find it. I'm just scrolling through.
Very kind of enigmatic.
Here we are. Yeah. So Nathan Trott put this up on his Instagram, didn't he? For what you may not now know, later you'll understand. Now I read that as, I'm going and you don't know the reason why. So, but perhaps other people may interpret that in a different way. I don't know. My thing has always been, if a player wants to leave Cardiff City, let them go, and I don't care who they are. Because they're our club, it's our club, and if you don't want to be with our club, then go somewhere else. And I know that's harsh, and I'm not for one moment you're doubting Nathan Trott's season. I think it's been fantastic, but if he doesn't want to stay, then there's people like Andy Dibble who could identify a lot of other goalkeepers who could sign for the City.
But just on that one, Al, and I will jump in there, and I'm quite shocked at what I've read there, because with the goalkeeper, his age and experience, and I am biased, but what a big stage, Cardiff City, the Championship. There ain't no bigger clubs around in my eyes. And also from the coaching perspective, if I was his goalkeeping coach, I'd be trying to get into him at this moment in time and be saying, listen, you can have a great career here. This is a club that's going places. Make no mistake about it. So I'm a little bit shocked to read that. But
also, if you're his manager, if Warnock was his manager and had read that, he'd be hauling him over the coals. He'd be saying, what the hell are you doing on social media writing this nonsense? I think.
Yeah. Well, you're going back to what you said. He might be pulling him and saying, well, if you don't want to be here.
Yeah, it could be. It could be.
So Peter, does anybody want to come in on that? Because interestingly, probably totally unrelated, I imagine. But on the weekend, Tyra had a game. He looked pretty good, actually. And, Nathan was on the bench. Any comments on that somewhat enigmatic post?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? I think what Andy said, Trott's a fantastic shot stopper, fantastic on his feet. Doesn't like to come off his line a lot for crosses, and worries me totally when that happens. But he has had a fantastic season. I'd love him to stay if he wants to stay. If he doesn't want to stay, as Al says, no thank you, off you go. On a comment you made earlier, Steve, when you're talking about the camaraderie within the dressing rooms, I went to the Player of the Year Awards ceremony on Saturday night, and the one thing that struck me, there are no prima donnas in our team now. They're all level-headed people. They get on absolutely brilliantly. I mean, when the awards were being announced, the cheers amongst them, you could tell there's real friendships there, and nobody didn't have time for the supporters. They're an excellent group of mostly young men, and the future looks brilliant.
Yeah, and that was kind of evidenced a little bit with I saw the footage of Dylan's acceptance speech.
Yeah,
Not the most.
quite shy, isn't he?
Yes.
I mean, there's another example. So I was at the bar getting a pint, obviously, because it was the celebration, and the bar was on a corner, and on the other corner there was Dylan, and he was ordering some sort of drinks. I wasn't really listening to what he was saying, but to go talking to the lady behind the bar, and he was so polite. I mean, you hear all these stories about footballers these days with their egos, as they were, but he was so, thanks so much if you can do that for me. And I thought, what a grounded young man. Let's hope it continues.
Can use as an example with that, Pete. Sorry, Steve, if I just cut in there. I can remember I went to the end of the season awards years ago. It was in Pete Wickham's day, and he was the one exception. But the other players, you had to have a player on the table at the time, if you remember. And we had Matt Connolly with us, and so on. And it got to the end of the sort of awards, and they all jumped in taxis and they left us. Didn't even say goodbye. The only exception to that was Peter Wickham, and he came and sat on our table. And he said, I'll leave the youngsters going to town. He said, I'll have a pint with you. And he stayed with us for ages. But you can see the difference, can't you? That all I remember from that, and it was years ago, but all I remember from that night was not the night itself. It was the fact that all the players couldn't wait to get out of there. It was awful. Absolutely awful.
Absolutely.
Do you have much in the way of memories of Wits, Andy?
Yeah, I do. Well, obviously, I can only speak too fondly of him. I had just over a year, I think, with Wits, and got to know him really well. I kind of known him from before anyway. When I come back to the club, fantastic guy, fantastic footballer more than anything, and obviously a brilliant career. And what a legend for Cardiff City! A wonderful left foot, as we all know, and obviously very, very, very sad what happened. But again, player that where I was related to there. He was a guy that had time for everybody.
Thinking about Wits, one of the things, again, he came on the show once or twice, but he's this kind of guy, in when it was in person sort of thing. You wouldn't even know he was there. He was just like so bashful and kind of, just got on with his job. Were you in training, Andy? Was he like firing in shots at you to try and
I think you've knocked the nail on the head. He was one of them players that could stamp his authority on the game, but he wasn't a screamer and shouter. He was a very, very calm, one of those calmer players. I think all players, whichever position you're playing, have a different makeup. And Peter was one of them who was more a quieter player, and you didn't really hear him, but you knew he was on the pitch because of the quality of the things he could do. And off the pitch, he was equally the same. He was shy. If you were sat down and eating together, he won't be the one. There's always one that'll be making a lot of noise, or one or two. He was one of them that sort of like remained in the background and preferred to go about it in a quieter way.
Was he pinging in free kicks against you and that kind of thing, though, working on his
I mean, he was always practicing his free kicks, and you could tell, like the David Beckhams of the world, the practice he put in came to fruition on the pitches.
Yeah. Sorry, Peter, I talked across you just now.
No, I was just going to say an example of how polite he was, if you like, was when he scored a goal. Peter was able to let him press, just go back and end of the game. Just showed his character. Yeah,
that season where he scored loads and loads of goals. I think he scored a hat-trick and everything, didn't he? He was just like crazy. Just took it all, not in an arrogant way, but he wasn't demonstrative about it, Yeah, there you go. That's what I do, Amazing character. Because it could have been so different. Because he was so absolutely brilliant, But you wouldn't have known it from him.
Can I just pop a question to Andy, Steve? If that's okay?
Yeah, sure. Fire away.
Andy, one thing we all know, BBM doesn't know what he's talking about. He's had a terrible season, and the one thing that's really worried me is no goalkeeper on the bench. What are you
Good point.
Well, I obviously watching from, I say, afar, it has surprised me that, because he's been fortunate and nothing's happened, and he's one of very few that doesn't do it. So I don't like to tempt fate. I mean, I think Neil did it once or twice, but as a coach, especially if you sat there and something does happen, you're thinking, I wish we had somebody on the bench. So it's a big risk in my eyes to take. It hasn't affected them, but you never know, it might have done. And if it had been in a big game, questions might have been asked. But fortunately, it doesn't turn out that way. So next season, I hope he thinks about it in a different way. I mean, I'm not telling him what to do, but personally, there's enough subs anyway to cover positions.
Yeah.
That having a goalkeeper on the bench would be very, very important and a high priority for me.
Andy, in terms of being a coach, okay, so if City Championship club, if you're coaching the goalkeepers, do you think 3 is a good number to work with? I know, because obviously Matt Turner's there as well. I know they got the young lad Higgs as well, so that would make it up to 4. I mean, what is the sort of for you? What's the best number to be training with day in, day out? Because historically, perhaps we only ever thought of 2, didn't we? We never thought of the squad having 3 keepers in the same kind of way. What's the best way?
Well, I always work with 3, and I loved having 4. But what I did on 2 other days of the week, I always made sure, via Darren Lovell, that I included the youth team goalkeepers,
okay,
just to give them experience and for them to be around the senior play or the senior goalkeepers, rather than sort of like throwing them in at the deep end. Keep them involved, so and it creates a group. And then obviously when they do need to step up, they've seen it a little bit rather than ostracizing them. So 3 would normally be the number, 4, and then as I said, on 2 other days, I try and definitely one day, so it could be 6. But obviously there's ways of working them because you splitting them up into 2s.
Yeah.
But it's also good when the youth team goalies are around. I mean, they don't have to get involved in all the shooting practices. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. But they can look and learn and use that as a tool.
Great, brilliant.
Peter, did you have anything else for Andy?
The other thing I was going to say about goalkeepers at the moment is I get very concerned about their health and fitness, because about halfway through the second half, they'll have to have a sit down. It's sort of the managers having a tactical chat. I don't know if there's anything linked to that, but it didn't used to happen.
Well, it does make me smile. I'm too embarrassed to comment on it recently because goalkeepers sitting down on the floor and saying they have cramp is I don't like that at all. I mean, I'm sat here with a smile, but I'm actually embarrassed. I mean, it shouldn't be happening. In my opinion, it's got to stop. It's gamesmanship. They're trying to slow the game down, and in my opinion, it's wrong. So I'm against all that.
Yeah, it's so blatant, isn't it? Have you got any thoughts, Andy, on the idea next season that they're going to extend the playoffs to 8?
No, well, I've heard that, but I prefer it the old way. I mean, I look as well. I'm going to relate to my own son's situation at Kidderminster, where they dropped out of the National League and they're now in the Conference North, but had a great season than they did last year. And in that league, it's a similar sort of situation. One go up and the rest play off. But I'm not a lover of that at all. I think it's just a money-making venture for me personally.
Yeah, they keep on changing stuff for the point of view, I think, sometimes. But I think it is to do with money, actually. Yeah. I wanted to ask you, I don't know, people probably asked you this before. Who, in your opinion, is in your lifetime, I suppose, who's the greatest goalkeeper you ever come across?
Well, I would have to say Big Nev, because I was so proud and honoured to win 3 Welsh caps and probably another 23, 24 on the bench, I would say. So it would have to be Big Nev. He stopped me getting more caps than I would have liked. But obviously, during that period, I worked at close hand with him. And, the best I've seen, really. And during that era, obviously, you will have had Schmeichel, Seaman to go in the hat with him as well. But definitely Big Neville.
And what was so good about Nev?
Well, it's going to sound old-fashioned, and we all know the game's changed that way, and you got to be the subject now. Is he a footballing goalkeeper, or does he keep the ball up the net? There's more people want to go for the footballing goalkeepers than the people that kept the ball up the net. But what Neville did, he had the biggest start of ever, and he kept the ball out of the net.
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it, actually. This playing at the back thing with goalkeepers, I like people on the left, people on the right. I like proper goalkeepers. I'm an old geezer. I can't help myself. But I have kittens sometimes, and I see stuff going on, and doing like routines, juggling the ball across the line, and all kinds of stuff. Is that something as a goalkeeping coach, Andy? Is that something you've kind of got to coach them about as well, like when to do it and when not, sort of thing?
I mean, obviously, you have to go with what the manager's requirements are. So depending on the manager, really. But yeah, I mean, there's always going to be an element that they need to play long, short, and obviously mid-range. But most of the teams now want the goalkeeper to be able to play out from the back. There's still the odd team that, want to play longer. Now, I think there's personally, from my point of view, I'd like to see football mixed up. So you're not overdoing it and you're not putting the goalkeeper and the players around him unless they are like Pep's Manchester City. Well, in fact, you can go back to big Donnarumma and the mistake he made against Arsenal.
Yeah.
I've been to Man City regularly, as everybody knows, and Donnarumma is not an Edison. And Manchester City have changed the style a bit and gone a little bit longer. And I'm pleased to see that, because there's no point trying to play to somebody who has a weakness in that area. And it costs goals. I mean, if you look at the goal, and I'll give you the quickest example I can think of, Arsenal's equalising goal, if that ball is thrown down the touchline, instead of back to the goalkeeper who's right in front of his own goal, that goal doesn't happen.
Yeah.
So it's one of them. I think you need a fine in-between line of, when we play and when we don't play. Play when you can play, but, don't take silly risks.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you. There's a question from Viv Granfield there, which is good, but I'll come on to now. But so after the match, when you're watching the game these days, there's way more than I do. It's all iPad this and iPad that, and they're looking at all this stuff and breaking everything down. So is that similarly? Would that be your job, sort of during the game, keep an eye on the keeper and sort of have all those kind of stats and this and that, the feedback at the end of the game? Does it work that way for you?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, everything like that is taken into consideration and looked at on a regular basis before, during, after the game, and obviously in the build-up during the week. But also, you take into account as well the opposition goalkeeper. People now are closely monitoring, what style of play the opposition use. Shall we close him down quickly? Everything is so much more advanced now.
Yeah, and very, very technical, I suppose. I wanted to ask you about your role. We can say you work with the England team. That's perfectly fine. It's very, very, very admirable and a fantastic thing to achieve in your career, right? It doesn't matter. Wales England thing doesn't matter. It's amazing what you're doing. Is there kind of I suppose it obviously differs when there's games coming up. Do you have like a weekly kind of routine sort of thing, or just week by week?
Yeah, obviously, as I explained to you earlier, my routine's changed now with the severity. My ongoing knee problems. I was asked by England to come into a part-time scouting role where I monitor their under-21-year-old goalkeepers that are in the squad down to 14s. So I'm watching 3 or 4 games a week. And interestingly, going back to what you were talking about, it's the first topic of conversation is, can they play?
Is it?
So, yeah, it's a big thing now. But it's interesting because obviously, you've got Jordan Pickford as England's number 1, who has had a brilliant career for England. I wouldn't say he's unbelievable with his feet, but he's decent with his feet. Do you know what I mean? So things have changed, things have moved on. And on the subject of why I'm doing what I'm doing, because I'm really missing being on the grass. It's the first time in 43 years.
Yeah, it's a long time.
I have to look at my health well, but I'm thoroughly enjoying the role.
Viv wants to ask you, who do you think who's the best goalkeeper around at the moment? Who's impressing you these days?
Well, I would have to go for Donnarumma at Manchester City, and that's not because of being there as a player. And I can go back to what I said earlier. He's not the greatest with his feet, but in my opinion, he has this massive frame. He makes big saves at big times during the game, and has won Manchester City more games this season, and will continue to do so.
Yeah. And you support two clubs called City, don't you?
Yes, absolutely. And Cardiff City is my number one anyway, because it goes back to my, when I was 11-year-old and I was a left back that struggled, and I became a goalkeeper very quickly because I wasn't.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, no. I started left back, and then I was put in goal at my local team, Hopefield, and then I ended up becoming a goalkeeper. And my not confidence. The team I joined, we ended up losing 5 or 6-0. But during those 5 or 6-0 games, there was 2 gentlemen, one called Graham Reynolds, who's sadly no longer with us, and then a guy called Adrian Jones, who invited me along to Cumbrian Stadium, where, that's where my goalkeeping journey started, at Cumbrian Stadium.
Wow. I played in goals there. I wasn't very good, Andy. You might not be surprised to.
Well, it was a Tuesday and a Thursday night, and then obviously the next step was becoming an apprentice and making my debut, when sadly Ronnie Healy went down 15 minutes before the team was announced. And there you go, I was thrown in on my 17th birthday.
He was a top keeper, Ron Healy, wasn't he?
Yeah, it's interesting with Ronnie. So sad that his career ended with a pelvic problem. And then, funnily enough, after leaving Cardiff, going on to Luton and moving to Manchester City, I moved in not far from Ronnie and struck up a great friendship with him and his son. Not only was my mentor, but we became great friends after. And he really had a big influence on my career, from when I made my debut to when I finished my last game football, which was, funnily enough, my last game in football was for Accrington Stanley at 40 in the FA Cup.
Yeah, you've had an amazing career, really. The way it's worked out, I never knew that. You started out as a left back, and then going to goalkeeper. There you are now, working with the England setup, and you play for all these different clubs. It's incredible the way it's worked out for you. You must be delighted, I suppose, with the way your career's worked out in lots of ways, Andy. Yeah.
Yeah, I am, and I mean, I can openly say my biggest heartbreak was when I was shown the door at Cardiff. I don't want to talk too much about it because.
Who was the manager then?
Steve Morrison.
Right.
But I'd just seen Alex Smithies pick up Player of the Year award. Everybody had told me how well I'd done with him and Neil Etheridge. And all of a sudden, I'm shown the door, and I was never really told why. Couldn't understand why. And if I'm honest, it took me a long, long time to get over it. I am over it now. And I look back and I still think, why did he do that to me? But, that's football, and you have to overcome these things that happen to you. And the amount of support, and I still have to this day, from fans like Al and Peter yourself, it was amazing, You're
very well thought of, Andy. Isn't that?
No, that's great.
Usually thought of.
It broke my heart. I mean, and I don't say that lightly.
I think from a fan's perspective, Andy, okay, what peed us off the most, I think, right, is someone who hasn't got any connection with the club thinks that he can just disregard a club legend. That's the way we looked at it, okay? So Morrison had nothing at all. You don't have to comment about this, but Morrison had no connection with the club as far as we were concerned, and he just thought that he could use his arrogant self to say, well, there you are, Andy Dibble. He didn't know the way perhaps that we felt about you as fans. It was a terrible. And I think we've spoken about it, subsequently. It's just a terrible way to treat you,
No, I know. I think the biggest thing for me, I'll openly say it, if he'd have sort of like pulled me in and, I don't know, 2 months before the end of the season and said, Dibs, you've been a great servant to the club. I want to go my own way. But to pull me in on the Thursday before the team travelled to the last game of the season at Burnley. To Derby. And just say, you're not coming with us, that's you done. And I wasn't even allowed in the stadium that night to go and say Tyrrell. There was a Vets game which I was supposed to take part in. So it was done viciously and not nice. But, the good thing is I'm over it, and I've still come back and still got a lot of good friends at the club, and, the fan base has been brilliant to me.
Any comments on that, Peter?
Yeah, I think that was evident, Andy, when you did that speech underneath the Ninian stand recently. On the stage. Yeah. That's where we sit in the Ninian stand, and we saw the crowd have gathered just to hear you, your comments, and it just shows how deep the love you really.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
So yeah, I mean, there's things you could say about Steve Morrison. One of the things that came across from him, I think, but actually, just as an observation, might be totally wrong, led to his kind of downfall from with his role at the club was an overabundance of self-belief. Just to put it kind of mildly. Al, to ask you something about something else. We'll let that one rumble. Is with Leicester City, and then going down now to the level below, and isn't that incredible, by the way, from winning the Premiership to what's happening with them? And thank our lucky stars, that we're going the other way. Do you think that's the kind of that might open up opportunities? I think of the young lad who was on loan on the weekend scored a good goal. Would that maybe open up opportunities for BBM because it was links with the club, with their kids, and because they're gonna have a massive squad change, aren't they? I think.
Yeah, I don't know, Steve. I mean, we mentioned before. I mean, it's just a huge example of mismanagement, Leicester City, and we've none of their players on relegation clauses. How they're going to be able to afford to even function next year is going to be very, very difficult. And you're right, that could have so easily. It could have been us, and I don't think Leicester are going to be as well equipped to go back up as we were. But that being said, when we came down, it was a catastrophe, and I felt like any Leicester City fan probably does now. Going back to what Pete said right at the start of the show, I thought if we made playoffs, I'd have been happy.
I agree with that.
It was such doom. It was such doom and gloom, wasn't it? And I'm sure Leicester fans feel exactly the same way. Sheffield Wednesday fans, it's been gallows humour for them, isn't it? All season. They've had
great support, by the way.
Fantastic. And I think we've all got as football fans, I think we've all got a soft spot for Sheffield Wednesday. Fantastic.
Yeah. Very dignified, actually.
Oxford have been there or thereabouts for so long now, and I think it was only a matter of time, wasn't it, before they came down. So it'll be interesting now next year. Once again, the Championship, it's full of huge clubs, isn't it? You can go right the way through.
You could be going to Tottenham.
Yeah, or West Ham, but Tottenham. I don't know. We'll see. It is strange the how it's all ended up to teams like, with the greatest respect to them, Brighton, Brentford, Bournemouth, and now established Premiership clubs who aren't, to my mind, big clubs, but they're just well managed, and they've that could have been us, couldn't it? We could have been one of those, and I always look at those three clubs and think, had we done something differently, we could have been one of them. Hopefully.
Sorry for jumping in there, Al. I think recruitment is massive. Obviously, I'm not saying, but if you look at Brentford and Brighton, the way they've recruited without going crazy, Bournemouth as well has been unbelievable. And if you can get, that right, you got every chance. And one thing Cardiff have got more than those clubs is a bigger fan base.
Yeah, and Al kind of cheekily nodded towards it earlier, but obviously you're spending a lot of time looking at young up and coming goalkeepers, for example, Andy, and you get, are you going to find a new one for City, or what you reckon?
I can't tell you who it is, but I've been asked my opinion on it.
Have you? Okay.
Yes, I have. Yeah, but I better let Gavin Ward tell you that, not myself. So there is one they're keeping an eye on, and he is playing in the north of England. So, but that my lips have to remain sealed, lads. As much as I'd love to tell you.
And the north of England's a fairly large place, so you're okay with that.
It's been out there, but I'm sure you'll get it at some stage.
And do you, before I go back to Peter, do you think that going into the Championship, I suppose it opens the door, doesn't it, to the club to bring in more youngsters who aren't getting the look in at the top level? At that development stage, one level below, it's more exciting and interesting for players and their agents to look at, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, this is where Brian will come in. Obviously, the club should sell itself anyway. There's some top class young players in the Premier League. I mean, yesterday I went to watch Man United versus Sunderland under 21s. I don't want to bore you there, but the lad Shea Lacey, who's had some involvement for Man United's first team. I mean, I look at him and I know he can play in the Championship, and you would be looking at that type of player if you are going to bring in those long players. but you have to use the loan market wisely, and then obviously use, as I said, use the young players we've already got, and then I'm sure strengthen through the middle of the team with your own players as well. So I think there's a way you can do it and use the loan market very well.
And Peter, with BBM, he's really, it just doesn't matter how young, Danchev, this kind of players, 15-year-olds, 16-year-olds getting the, Tank coming on the weekend. Yeah, which is really refreshing, because it hadn't been the case before, is it?
No. I think we're really on a bit of a knife edge at the moment. We've got a huge opportunity now to fulfil the potential of this club. We've got such a fantastic basis, such a great amount of young players coming through. People like some of the loan people like Kellyman, I wouldn't be at all surprised to see him back with us for another loan year next year. There's no point at all in going back to Chelsea. He's done any football there. But the chance now, we've got a strong foundation now, built by somebody who understands how to build a club from the bottom up. And I just hope we don't mess it up. I really think we need to support BBM all the way through, because it's a great chance.
And Al, Scanlon hasn't had as much of an impact as maybe he could have had, but maybe because Joel Bagan's, kind of seen him off, kind of thing, really. But
yeah, I mean, perhaps Joel has played so well because he knows someone's sort of biting at his ankles, and it's the same way with NG, because Ronan Capaccio was there, wasn't he? And NG's game seemed to improve the competition for places, and I think Scanlon and Bagan is a case in point, really.
When you look at the amount of players that we had last year that have been brought on so much by BBM in a year, you mentioned Perry NG there. This time last year, if you said he's moving, I'd say thank you very much. Off you go.
I mean, my biggest fear is we all wax lyrical about the manager. If he's that good, which we think he is, other clubs might come and have a look at him, and it wouldn't surprise me. And I've always said, sort of tongue in cheek, keep his family happy, make sure that his wife and kids are really happy in Cardiff. They don't want to go anywhere else, and then he'll be happy. But I just think he is that good, isn't he? And we talk about him being a young man, Steve. He's 47, so he's not, he's younger than us, but he's
they're all younger than me, Al.
Yeah, there we go. All playing golf like you. No, but I just think he is that good. And if you're a bigger club, are there any bigger clubs? Yeah, but if someone offers him more money, I'd be more fearful losing him than any of the players.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, he has been signing of the season, absolutely. So I'll ask Andy this, because it's quite a nice way to end the show. And I don't mean in a dramatic way. Say whatever you think, Andy, obviously. But if you were, because you do, you come across young players, and they're considering options, what would be your advice to a young player who was thinking about Cardiff City as an option?
Well, I think people know my feeling toward, and this is not biasness again, but you need to look at the size of the club and where it can go. And for me, there's no better place than to come to a club like Cardiff. What an opportunity for any young player. And it needs to be, and this is where Brian will step in. And I think he can use his contacts to get some of these better young. Don't get me wrong, there's going to be some more experience needed for the Championship, in my opinion, as well. The balance is imperative to get right next season. And obviously, we talked about the companionship team spirit. The whole package has got to be spot on for next season. And I'm optimistic, to be honest. Let's give him every chance. And I think he deserves, it can't be rushed, obviously, but he's certainly gone in the right direction this season. And patience is another word that I think will be needed. Yeah,
it's not always in abundance with football fans, is it, patience? But
no.
Is BBM, the final question for you, Andy, is BBM, do you get the impression, do you think he's well thought of in football circles?
Yeah, definitely. And actually, when you said he's 47, he's not old and he's not young, he's in between. But I suppose from his point of view, he's done a lot of homework, as I call it, with working with younger players. And I'm sure personally he's relishing the fact now that he has the chance to make himself a big name in football. And 47 years of age sounds a good age to take our tremendous club forward. So, in my opinion, he's the right man for the job.
Yeah, that's a great way to end it. Andy, thank you very much for coming on tonight. It's always a real pleasure to chat with you. Good luck with you with help. Great to see you on bouncing back, and nice to hear you saying great things about Cardiff City, which is lovely.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, Al. Thanks, Pete.
Thanks, Al.
For inviting me on again.
We'd love to get you back sometime.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Cheers, guys. Thanks a lot. Thank you. Bye-bye.
This channel is powered by an incredible membership community on Cardiff City World and patreon.com/Ace Podcast Nation. Becoming a member unlocks exclusive rewards from early access to live event tickets, bonus content, and even the occasional inside transfer scoop when we get it. But more importantly, it allows us to bring you top quality Cardiff City content 7 days a week. Across those 7 days, we're talking match previews, exclusive interviews, instant match reactions, the breakdown podcast, tactical deep dives, the spotlight series, Bluebirds Rewind, Academy Focus, and just so much more. Led by myself, backed by an army of passionate Cardiff City fans, this is content created by fans for fans. Balanced, professional, and 100% all about the club we all love. If you enjoy what we do, then join the community today and support what we are doing as we help to keep Cardiff City World flying high.